All right. Welcome everyone back to the Radiantpreneur Rising Show. I'm Jess Tomlinson, as you probably know, and I'm really excited to have this conversation today with my dear friend, Starr Sheppard-Decker. I was just practicing rolling her name off of my tongue, and just as her name implies, like she is this beautiful, like complex being that I love so much. And we jam on all of these different layers of really coming into alignment with who we are. So I'm excited for you to learn more about Starr and for us really just to dive in. Like I feel like they're just going to get a transmission from you, Starr. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I adore you, and I know that, we've known each other for several years now, like over 3 years now, which is just crazy and
Yeah.
awesome. And I just so appreciate what you bring to the world, to your people, and it's an honor to get to have this conversation with you. So thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's such an honor to finally have you on. I know we've been
Yes,
intending it, so I'm glad that it worked out. And
me too.
I'm really excited for people to. I just feel like I want to say this so that they kind of understand, like when you and I are together, which has been, a few times, but
Mhm.
it had been a while since just most recently. It's just always so nourishing for me to have conversations with you
Oh,
on these deeper topics. So I'm excited to see where
yes.
this goes. And to kick off the conversation, I just have one question,
Yes.
um, and then we'll see where it goes.
All right.
But I'm excited to hear from you since I know we're sisters in visibility. We're both really passionate about helping people with that. So the question is, what visibility edges are you currently leaning into in your life or business
Mhm.
or both? Because we know they go together. So,
Yes, a great question. I love that. Well, I feel like, one thing that people easily make up about me is that I don't struggle with visibility because I am very visible. I have been for a really long time. I mean, I've been saying controversial stuff on the internet since like the early 2000s when Yahoo chat rooms were where everyone hung out. And I think that just because my visible is bigger than someone else's visible doesn't mean that I don't still have those edges. So I think that's a great question for me, because I know for me is really going deeper into my story and my journey on what I've been through, and because I've been through a lot. And it's one of those like layered things where we present ourselves, and then we get used to what that feels like, and then we peel back the layers and we present a little bit more and present a little bit more. And so I know my growth edge is really sharing about kind of my history with trauma and dysfunctional family. And I don't think a lot of people know all of that about me, that I
mhm.
haven't lived with my dad ever and haven't lived with my mom since I was 12. I went through a lot of abuse and dysfunction, and then of course married someone that felt just like family and had 2 kids with him, and went down a pretty rough journey with that. And that's
Mm,
really what catalyzed me to do all the inner work, was so that I didn't let these sort of horrific things that I went through define my life and define who I
mm,
am. And so I'm
yeah.
still figuring out ways. I know last year I got to publish my story as a chapter in an anthology book, Angel Women with Warrior Wings, Born to Love. And that was really powerful for me to get to share more of my story.
Yeah.
But the universe, the last few months, like since June, like all summer long, has been bombarding me with synchronistic messages that is basically like, it's time to share more of your story. It's time to
Mm.
it's time for me to really dive deeper into those darker places that I've been through. So, especially with the work that I do, so that my people can really trust that I can go to those darker places with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I I think this is so important, just oftentimes we can so get caught up in, what we're supposed to share or what we think people want to hear and really like push down the true stories that can both really like liberate ourselves, which I'm most passionate about,
Yes.
liberating yourself, but then, ironically also impact people the most,
Yes.
right? And
Exactly.
so I'm curious for you, like what was that moment that shifted, if we go back a little bit, like what prompted you to be like, all right, I think it's finally time to start sharing these darker pieces? And I know you're kind of like, it's an unraveling, right, for all of
Totally.
us.
Totally.
But was there a moment that kind of like shifted that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was actually at a local event here in Portland. That was I was doing some deeper work on receptivity. So I'd had a rough spring, some old stuff was coming up to be looked at. And I would say that was like the negative catalyst was like, all right, I really need to look at, stop looking at abundance, prosperity, and really look at my receptivity. And so I got
Mm,
some, a book that the universe called to me, and I started doing this receptivity practice, and I ended up getting a ticket to go to this event locally here in Portland called Show Up Live.
mhm,
And I was a little hesitant because I was going to be attending and working at the World Domination Summit for like a whole week. And so I was like, I don't know if I want to go to a 2-day event right before I'm working at this event for like a whole week. But the universe was really adamant that it was like, no, you need to go to this event. And it was 2 days of women sharing their stories from stage and
mm,
some really deep, hard stuff. And some of it modeled my own experience and some of it didn't. But it was really like that was the deep kind of gut punch. And really being honest with myself, who were the people that I was drawn to the most who spoke, and they were the ones who
mhm,
had been through the hardest stuff and were willing to share that in a vulnerable way. And so that
mm,
was just kind of like that last little tipping point, going from like my brain and an intellectual understanding of that to really feeling it in my body and being like, oh, I could be that person for someone, like
yeah.
like you were saying, I could really share more of my stories and my deeper, things that I've been through and how I got to the other side and how I've been able to, keep showing up for my own life. Despite some of
Mhm,
these ongoing issues, some of them, are from the past and some of them are still very present in my life. And so
mm,
I think that was really, and then I went to the World Domination Summit, and the universe screaming continued. It was like every story, that someone else told me that was really vulnerable and impactful. It was like, oh my gosh. And then I got to see Humble the Poet speak at World Domination Summit, and he
yeah, I
shared
love
his
him.
deep, he shared his deep story. And that was just like, okay, universe, I get it. I get it. I'm sharing my
Yeah,
story. And then I actually did on Facebook share a few kind of longer, more vulnerable in the moment posts.
yeah.
And one about like some stuff with my ex-husband, another about my weight gain recently.
Mhm,
And the feedback was just phenomenal. And like the engagement, first of all, was really great. But people were reaching out to
mhm.
me in private message and just saying like, oh my God, your story is my story too. Thank you for sharing. And even at
Mm,
the event that you and I attended, a month ago, people were coming up to me and just like with tears in their eyes being like, thank you. And they didn't even react or anything online. These were just people that were moved by me
yeah.
sharing my story. And so it was just kind of that ongoing, like, okay, it is scary to hit that post button when you're really revealing yourself more deeply. And
Yeah.
the impact is really what it's all about.
Yeah. And I love that you said, like, people are coming up to you, but they didn't even engage online. And this
Nope.
is a point that I make over and over and over again to
Mm-hmm.
people that are like, nobody is listening. And I'm like, look, I have 1,000 examples. Okay, that's being dramatic, but I have like a lot of examples
Yeah,
that I always come back to. And the key is like you have to actually get out in community in order
right.
to receive that feedback from
Of
people that
course.
will maybe only give it to you in person. So not everybody's going to
Mm-hmm.
do that if you have 100% online business, which is fine. But for me, it's very nurturing to be in person with people and have them come up to me, and I'm just blown away. They're like, that thing you said months ago, it just stuck with me. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what? You follow me? Like, you never like anything,
Right.
you never comment. Like,
Yep.
wow. Like, and it's such an affirmation that, like, no matter what, as long as it is feeling in alignment with your soul, with who you are, with, your own path, keep doing it because somebody is out there
Yes.
receiving the information.
Yes.
I'm going to keep talking. I'm going to grab a Kleenex because I'm like dripping down my face. So if you have anything,
Yeah.
do you have anything to say after that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because I think the same thing too, that we can make up that if we're not getting the likes and the comments and the engagement, we've gotten so used to, seeing that little heart or that thumb, meaning, kind of validating our value or our worth or the impact that we're making. And that's something I have to remember over and over again too, is that, just because people aren't saying anything online doesn't mean that they're not seeing it. It doesn't mean that it's not impacting them. And yeah, I'll have people tell me, even from the spiritual community that I was a part of for 13 years that I left in 2015, I'll have people that I'm still connected with be like, oh yeah, I still remember that one thing that you said in that prayer, Sunday morning, and that stuck with me. And that's been my mantra ever since. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like you never know, what you're going to say and how it's going to impact people. And it might be, I believe that, we're conduits for what people need to come through us, and so there's a certain element of trusting that, because I do my Starr Spiritual Sundays every week, and it's become an opportunity for me to practice that trust that, people are receiving this and it's impacting them in ways that I may never fathom, but that doesn't mean that it's not making an impact.
Yeah. And I'm curious how you keep coming back to that, because you and I share, I'll just call it a common wound and desire as performers, right? Like we both have we both have been performers. You're a gorgeous singer, and I think, have you performed in other ways as well?
Yeah, I've been on stage since I was like 4.
Okay, yeah. So, and similarly, I've sang, danced, acted, all that stuff. And so what I want to kind of like drop into is there's that archetype inside of us that's really strong and really loves to have the attention and to get the feedback.
Yeah.
And yet this whole piece that we're talking about is really trusting that even if you don't, that you are still serving. And so I'm curious, like, I know how I walk myself through that, but how do you keep coming back to that, like healing that part of yourself that really loves the attention, I guess?
Yeah, no,
Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. I love that. Well, I guess part of it is I've set up my life to where I do a live event every month. And that's so next month, it'll be 3 years that I've been doing this live event. Yeah. Portland Lunch Meetup is almost 3 years old.
That's amazing, Starr. I didn't realize it was that long, because we've known each other for, I think it's almost like 4. This coming April is when I joined the community we're part of. Wow.
Yep. And so, and it was shortly after the speaker training in like the summer of 2016 that birthed this event for me, because I didn't feel ready yet to speak on other people's stages. I was still, as a performer, I had done all the things. I'd sing and dance and, even do affirmative prayer or make an ass out of myself in a skit. Like all those were comfortable.
Totally.
but really speaking from the heart about things I was passionate about still sort of terrified me. So I made this event both as a connector, as a way to connect my community, as a platform to give other people a platform to speak, but also for myself to give myself practice on speaking. And so I know that part of the way that that feeds me is exactly what you're talking about, because I have a little coaching section at the end of my event, live coaching section. And so even if all month long I question if I'm making any impact, I have this one event a month that is just a great reminder where I get to show up and really provide this container for people to connect and learn and grow together in and be inspired. And I get to really see the impact in the room. And so I think it's important to make wins for ourselves, it's like if we need something to set up our life or our business, to make sure that we get that.
Oh my gosh, Starr. Yeah, I did a post recently about this, that visibility requires both your openness to say yes to visible opportunities that come towards you, but it also is you creating opportunities for yourself.
Yeah.
And if you don't do both, in my opinion, unless you're like already very well known and you're just getting lots of opportunities, but even then there's like, I believe, this piece of our desires that can go unfulfilled if we're not really also creating for ourselves how
Definitely.
we want to not even be seen, because that feels manipulative to me, but how we want to
Yeah.
nourish our own
Yes.
ability to serve, which requires visibility, right?
Totally, totally. And I think in the inner piece of that, I had one of my, so I get energy healing every month from the same guy that I've been
Mm,
seeing for like 4 or 5 years, and it's just so nourishing. And one of the things
gotcha.
that did come up for me this summer as I was looking at all this is some shame around that part of me that does want and like attention. And he was so amazing, and he was like, "So, you think Oprah doesn't like the attention?" You know,
Right. She
like
would not be doing it this long if she didn't like attention. Yeah.
right. And so I think, that's the lunch meetup is the outer part of that. But I think the inner part of that is really honoring that there is a part of me that does love the attention. And I remember a shaman coach years ago, as we were talking about this very thing, he was like, "So you need performance as part of your self-care."
Yeah.
He's like, you need to be going out and having a place where you can give and show up and shine and receive that attention, because that's just part of
Mhm.
your makeup. And some of us are wired to receive more attention than others. And, as my energy healer put it too, he's like, those of us that are wired for more attention, the performers and the artists, he's also a musician, you know, it's actually a gift to those people who don't want as much attention, who like hanging out in the back, and that we're
Yeah.
actually a gift. This desire to be seen, it sometimes it can be taken into a manipulation. But if it's,
Mhm.
I've learned that there's a part of me that performs from a sense of I'm great, right? And isn't really sure of herself. And then there's another part of me that performs as that conduit for just,
Yeah.
something bigger than me to be expressed through me, and
Yeah.
and receiving attention for that is part of it.
Yeah.
And so I think I had to heal the kind of wounded performer energy in myself so that I could show up in more of a pure performance and still not feel bad about the part of me that is like,
Mhm.
I just rocked your world, wasn't that awesome? Because that was awesome for me too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, and I love this so much because I truly believe that the gateway to healing these parts of ourselves is not denying them, it's
Yeah.
accepting them, right? And it's like the more that we push away these pieces that we think are too much or not enough or
Mhm.
whatever, right? Not okay. Um, the more that they're just gonna cry like a baby or
Yes.
tug on your pant leg and be like, wait, but I'm
Mhm.
important.
Yep.
And so it's like the irony of
Right.
that is the gateway. Acceptance is
Mhm.
the gateway. And then we won't, not that we won't need it as much, but we won't need it as validation.
Right, exactly. That's that pure form of expression. It's like, it's not so that I can know I'm worth it. Like, I used to be a karaoke DJ when my 15-year-old was a baby. And that was
Oh my
super
God.
fun for me to get out of the house. And, as a vocalist, it was really fun. I got to sing a bunch of stuff. And as a facilitator, I loved like building the energy and entertainer and all that stuff. And then I got to the point where I realized that part of what it was doing for me, it was giving me validation. And it
Hmm.
was validating the parts of me that still didn't feel enough. And
Hmm.
when I, after years of doing more inner healing and inner work and building up my confidence and learning to come from that place of conduit rather than, trying to get validation or compensate for something or try to prove something,
Yeah.
I didn't have a taste for it anymore. And it was kind of this, it's like, no offense to anyone who hangs out in karaoke bars, but when you do it on a regular basis, you see kind of there are people that live in that bar, like they're just there every night.
Yeah.
And I realized that, I wasn't willing to do what I do in exchange for like randos at a bar's validation at 2 o'clock in the morning. That wasn't,
Yeah.
and that I really needed to find a place to put that part of me that felt more fulfilling, and that I wasn't trying to get something, that it was more about trying to give something.
Yeah. Was that the piece? Was it the because that was a piece for me, was starting to notice the lack of fulfillment. It was like false
Mhm.
fulfillment.
Yes. It was ego fulfillment. It wasn't soul
Yeah.
fulfillment, you know? And I think there's a difference. Like I said, the ego is always looking for like approval and validation. And like in one of
Mhm.
the songs in my band, I say, I no longer beg the world to pat me on the head. Like, because that was a big
Mm,
part of what motivated me for a long time, was just like
yeah.
I would do, especially when I was a part of spiritual community, I gave so much of my time because just that little pat on the head, good job, you did a good job, was like what I was so hungry for, because I didn't get that as a little
Yeah.
girl. I didn't get that validation and approval. And then I realized that I actually had not too good boundaries, and I was giving way more away. And then people were just expecting me to be on call because, I got so much
Mhm.
validation from them just saying, do this, and I would do it. And I was such a good little girl. And it just became kind of
Yeah.
twisted and gross and unfulfilling. And I realized that I didn't want to do that to myself anymore.
Yeah. Me too.
Mm-hmm.
Me too. Yeah. Except
Mhm.
I actually did get the validation, but that was the problem, was like I was getting so much of the validation as a child that then I felt like I had to keep up with it
Oh,
and I
right.
could never mess up. So then
Uh-huh.
it was like, oh, this is how I receive love. Oh,
Right.
okay. Like now I have to always get A's. Like I remember the first time I got a
Mhm.
B was in art. Like really? And I was so like I was shaking, holding the paper, crying, bawling my head off, thinking I was just a total failure. Like really
Right.
art.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It
I
was
totally.
intense, man.
I had a lot of pressure to get good grades in school. That was a thing I had a lot of pressure on. But I actually,
Yeah.
because my dad was kind of a alcoholic rock star guy, I was actually encouraged to do anything but sing. Even though
Mm.
I could sing from a very young age, it was like, do anything but be a singer. So
Wow.
that was part of my healing journey, to even be able to sing in front of people.
Yeah.
I had my mom being like, "Oh, you're just like your father. Don't go down that path." And when I lived with my abusive grandmother, if I was singing in my room, she would actually come in and open the door and be like, "Oh, are you sick? I heard you moaning in here." Ha ha ha, and like think that was a joke.
Yeah.
And my first
Oh,
husband would be like, "Oh, who sings this song? Let's keep it that way." And so by the time I, separated from him when I was 23, I was like terrified of sharing that part of me. And I feel like for me, karaoke was actually a part of healing my
yeah.
relationship with performing, and learning that people actually wanted to hear my voice, because I knew I had a good voice, but the message was no one wanted to hear it.
Wow, this is like shocking to me because you have one of the most beautiful voices.
Thank
Like,
you.
I love listening to you when
Thank
you
you
do
so much.
sing, and yeah, and just yet like a powerhouse, man. And
Thank you.
um, can you speak a little bit to? So I know you serve people that have really gone through, these deeper, darker
Yeah.
things in their life and like trauma. And can you speak to how those kind of paths, that path of kind of the healer, right? And the
Mhm.
entrepreneur that wants to serve from that place, how it does serve. Because I think so often we can get into the place of like, which you and I know it takes a lot of healing. But if we go to like, this is actually a gift. Do you want to speak to that?
Mhm.
I don't know. That's coming up
Yeah.
for me.
No, and I think that's great, because we are still, as a culture, and especially in our industry of like personal and spiritual development and leadership, there's still some of that old, toxic approach to leadership, which is about being perfect and presenting
Mhm.
yourself as perfect. And, really, I talk about this in when I speak publicly, it dates back to religion, where we put the priests on the pedestal. They were closer to God, and we weren't allowed to, commune directly with God because we were unworthy sinners, and we had to go to the priest that had proven himself worthy, la la la. And as we know,
Yeah.
those priests aren't always worthy, but that's a whole other conversation.
Oh
um,
God.
and what I believe is that we all are expressions of the divine, and that we don't have to go through an intermediary to have direct access to source. But I think
Mhm.
that, we're having this shift from what happened for 100 years, which is inadequacy marketing, which is really
Mhm.
marketing to us based on our brokenness, basically telling us you're not good enough until you buy my shit. And we're really seeing that people are over that. And right now, people are hungry for real.
Yeah.
People are hungry for and craving authenticity not the buzzword authenticity, but actually really revealing who we are to our
Yeah.
people. And so I think those of us who have been through some hard times, who have, made our way and healed through trauma, even if we're still doing some of that healing, we don't have to like check, I'm done and now I'm better and now I can save you. I think that it's,
Hmm.
again, going back to inadequacy marketing. I think what people are really wanting to know right now is, are you my people? Do you have similar values? And have you been to the dark places that I'm in right now so that I can
Hmm.
trust that you can guide me back to the light, back to myself, back to
Hmm.
the truth? And so I think that the more those of us who are leaders who have been through stuff can talk about what we've been through and even what we're going through right now. Like, it's so
Hmm.
easy to talk about what happened to me 13 years ago. But like right now, one of my 3 children I haven't seen since 2015,
Yeah.
and that's still really heartbreaking. And we email every now and then, like logistical stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of heaviness and fear and
Hmm.
if I buy into that I have to be perfect, I wouldn't say that, because it's like, oh, well, you don't have every aspect of your life perfect, so how can I trust you as a leader? And I don't think that's how
Hmm.
that works. I think it's more, I don't have every aspect of my life perfect, and so you can trust that I'm real and that I'm getting through stuff
Yeah.
too. I've just done 15 to 20 years of studying personal and spiritual development, so I just have more tools in my toolbox. It's not that
Yeah.
I'm any smarter or any closer to the divine or any more perfect than anyone else. I've just been
Hmm.
studying this. I'm an expert in my field, and I have a lot of stories and perspectives and tools and resources that I think can help people get through things in the way that they helped me get through stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I love sharing as I'm going through things. And I
Mm-hmm.
know a lot of the prevailing wisdom from mentors out there that, that I have hired is like, no, 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 don't share while you're going through it.
Yeah.
Like, make sure that you're
Mm-hmm.
through it. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that to me, like, doesn't even make sense because life is so secular.
Yeah.
Secular, is that a word? Yeah.
Cyclical.
Cyclical. Thank
Yeah.
you. That's
You're
much
welcome.
prettier than secular.
They both work.
um yeah, like it goes in cycles, right?
Yeah.
And and even things that we think that we have worked through, like they might come up, and that's just life, and that's normal, and that's
Mm-hmm.
totally okay. And sometimes we're not even meant to look at certain pieces because we're not ready to deal with them until
Yes.
years later. And sometimes we're meant to like really go through a really hard time now because we're ready to deal with it now. And it's like
Yes.
there's wisdom in all of it. And for me, I think it's really heartbreaking to sit on a piece of wisdom that I could share. Um, I mean, not that I'm like, I don't even consider myself wise, but a piece, like a
I
nugget of
do.
something that I learned. Well, thank you, Sarah. I love you. A nugget I've learned or am learning, and to
Mm-hmm.
share what it's like to be in it, because
Yep.
that's actually the hardest part.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's like the post I was talking about my ex-husband and stuff. I wrote that sitting at the bar that he used to avoid coming home for. Like, I hadn't been there in 10 years probably, and I ended up meeting some people there, and all this stuff came up real time, and the meeting was over and they left, and I walked into the bar and I just sat there and was like, this is where he used to sit instead of coming home. And I just started writing on my phone, like just for myself. And then as I was writing through this, I was like, just share it. It's okay that it's
Hmm.
real time. It's okay that, stuff is coming up. Like, you're not that person anymore. And you're also the person going through this moment right now,
Yeah,
having whatever is being brought up, coming up. And
yeah,
so I think that, yeah, as I would say, the only danger zone I see is if we're using our people to heal our shit. Kind of like we were talking about earlier,
the
using
attention.
performance to get validation. That's the danger zone. I would say the same thing
Yeah,
here is there's a way to share our story that shows people that we're applying our tools in our life real time, as
yeah,
opposed to, you know, coming off as someone who doesn't know how to get through their own shit and needs coaching or needs support or needs therapy, and or is
yeah.
trying to use their community to get that validation and okayness. So I'd say that's just that. And it's a subtle, it's not like a black and white thing. It's a subtle nuance. But I think
Yeah.
that's the only place where I see, vulnerable visibility go so far into really have, and because I think that it breaks trust.
Mm-hmm.
If your people can't trust you to get through your own stuff, how can they trust you to help them get through theirs? And so I
Yeah.
think modeling that this is really hard and I'm not perfect, and I'm going to apply these tools that have worked for me in the past, and I know I can get through it, but right now this feels really gross and I don't like it. I think that is
Mm-hmm.
totally fair. I think it's the posts that are like, oh my God, the world sucks and everyone's out to get me. It's like,
Yeah.
maybe that isn't actually, because that's not in service to anyone. That's
Right.
just kind of falling apart and using social media as a place to vent. And so I think
Yeah.
there's a subtle distinction there for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I even think that even if you have a lesson to share and you are putting pressure on yourself to always, it's like what you're talking about, like
Mhm.
to always have to be vulnerable, because there is a certain elation once you get to that other side,
Yeah.
like we have, right?
Yeah.
And you've broken the wall of like, all right, I can be vulnerable and actually like this really serves and it feels really good.
Mhm.
That can still be like addicting in a way if
Totally.
you're leaning on it, and you are, the whole thing that I always like to come back to is identities, right? Like I like to work very like archetypal so that we can really understand that we are not one thing and we are all these different pieces as well.
Yes.
So if we are only identifying with the vulnerability within ourselves and we are like, I must be that way all the time, that is a
Mhm.
lot of pressure, first of all.
Yeah.
Um, and so it'll be the same thing as never sharing vulnerably.
Yes, totally.
It's so interesting how this all works, right? And so
Mhm.
uh, what I always come back to is how can I just set myself free and not have to be one thing and just
Yes.
trust that however the message is coming through is how it's supposed to serve the most, both for me, first of all, and for my
Mhm.
community.
Yes, I love that. And like you said, be willing to be multifaceted, to show our different sides. And
Yeah.
I know a long time ago, before I did a lot of this healing, like over a decade ago, I was really that like energy builder, and I've got all the energy and I'm bringing it, and it's kind of like the cheerleader, in the Enneagram, I'm the entertainer. And
Totally.
it's like, and everyone expected me to bring it, to bring the energy, to be the leader. And I remember going to this women's retreat, and I was always like, let's all play the board games at night. Let's make this, happen. And then there was one year where I think it was my third year attending this women's retreat that I actually attended every year for 9 years. And that was super healing for me.
Oh, wow.
But it was the third year, and I had some stuff with a friendship that had ended, and I was feeling really exposed and vulnerable and kind of raw. And I had a tender experience that day, and I didn't feel like playing board games.
Hmm.
But it was the very beginning of me fathoming that I didn't have to be that on person all the
Hmm.
time. That I
Yeah.
didn't have to be responsible for bringing the energy up in the room all the time. And
Hmm.
and I started, really asking for what I needed and giving myself more time and space to go into those deeper, darker places.
Hmm.
And having that not feel like I wasn't being me, that I could still
Hmm.
be me, even if I don't feel like playing board games tonight.
Yes.
And even if I just feel like sitting in my room and journaling and going to bed early, even at
Yeah.
this last event that you and I went to, in the past, I would have like stayed up all night with the people, and I was really proud of myself for making my energy like top priority. And so I
Yeah.
said no to a lot of things, and I took more time to myself, and I took more time in the morning at the end of the day to process and journal. And I'm happy to
Yeah.
report this is the first time I've ever gone to a 3-day event like that where I didn't feel like I needed a fucking week to recover.
Yeah.
Where I
Because
came
you
home.
would normally give so much and there'd be so much
Right.
output, right?
Right. That and
Yeah.
as an empathic extrovert who gets really high
Mhm.
off the people and takes on all their shit.
Same. Yes.
Yeah. Where, I would just be like so
Yeah.
wiped from everyone else's energy, where instead I was doing clearing practice before I went to bed, and
Hmm.
and using crystals and oils and meditations and affirmations to really
Hmm.
protect myself from other people's energies, and really, knowing like, okay, if you stay at that thing until 10, you're going to get high off all the people's energy and you're going to be up till 1. Is that really what you want? And
Yeah.
just being like, I really want to go with you to the thing and sing songs by the fire, but I really need to take care of me because that's the most important. And then I was able to
Yeah.
receive more from the event. And then I came back and I was still able to give to my family, my community. I took the afternoon off on Monday when I flew home, but I
Yeah.
woke up Tuesday morning like ready to go. not feeling wiped out and exhausted and crumbling like I had done in the past. And so, it's okay for me to sometimes be that person that brings the energy and is like, whoa, cheerleader, rah. And it's okay for me to sometimes be that person that says, thanks for the invite. I'm going to go journal in my room.
Yes.
And play a game on my phone and go to bed early,
You can be it all.
Exactly.
I'm curious, because you got on stage at that event, right? And our mentor acknowledged you really for the embodiment of how you were being. What do you think? And we've kind of been talking about it, but if you could kind of boil it down, what do you think shifted from before when you would get on stage and then this last time? What do you think that was?
That's a great question. I think it really is along the lines of what we were talking about, where even though I still listen to my mentors, and even though I still have coaches and healers and, and guides and accountability buddies and all this stuff, I stopped giving them my power, and I've kept it for myself. And I think when I first, even though I had already been seeing clients for several years, like 6 or 7 years, when I came into really hardcore business training, I felt so inadequate as a business owner that I sort of just gave my power away to everyone else. I was like, well, everyone else must know more about my business than I do. And I think like in the last couple of years, it's been like, first of all, I only want to do things that feel really aligned, like in my body, that aren't just an intellectual, that would be cool because it might make me money, or some other person told me I was supposed to do that, or even my coach said that this is the way to go, and to really, no matter what, stay grounded in myself and listen to myself. And then also practice. Like my lunch event has given me a lot of practice. So because I do live coaching, every month, and I've been able to practice that, like listening and offering up words that aren't just helpful for the one person, but that speak to the room. And I've gotten way better at like managing the energy of the room. And I was already pretty good at that. But from like a retreat spiritual perspective, this is more from like how to lead an event that really brings value to people, in the business community. But I think the biggest thing is really just standing in my power and not coming from a place. I think that was the first time I took the stage at that event where I didn't have anything to prove to anyone. It was really just to myself. I just wanted to prove to myself that I could do this different thing that we were being taught how to do. And it wasn't about, like, it was great hearing that validation from our mentor, and I didn't need it. And I didn't.
You didn't need it. Yeah. Yeah. I could so feel that witnessing you. And I was really appreciating because I felt like I had a similar breakthrough. It's funny, like, as both of us being the performance type. And I know I talked to you after I had like a hour-long breakthrough on stage, working through, my fear that I'm not this magical creator anymore. And I was just so appreciating you listening to me afterwards, that the end result of what our mentor, wanted me to take away was actually not my takeaway. My takeaway was that I didn't have to prove myself on stage and that I, didn't have to position myself or tell everybody that I've done, a quadrillion events, even though our mentor kept saying, you've only done 2 events. You've only done 2 events. You need to practice more. And I'm just like, it's really, and I had that fear come up, which I know I shared with you after. And then I was like, no, that is like my biggest celebration. I don't have to prove to anybody. Like, I know,
exactly,
who I am and what I stand for. And I know myself so well. And I think that's really the celebration. That's really what we're talking about here, is just coming home to yourself and deeply knowing yourself.
Yeah. And being able to not only listen, but act on what you hear. I think those are the kind of 2 things. Like, I was just at an event this last weekend, and it was really great. And that was a theme that kept coming up, is like, be willing, listen to yourself and be willing to disappoint someone else in order to honor yourself.
Yeah.
And here I was at this event, and it was like the end of the first day. And for whatever reason, like there was nothing against the person who was performing on stage. It was like a final performance thing right at the end of the event. But I got a full body, like, get the fuck out of here. We're done. And
Yeah.
it took me like 5 to 10 minutes to honor that because I didn't want, to insult him as a performer, to be like walking out in the middle of his performance. And, I didn't want to let anybody else down who maybe wanted to connect with me after the day because I had opened up the event with a meditation. And my business mind was like, you might get potential clients if you stick around and talk to people and all that stuff. But after really just sitting with it, it was like, the message is clear. It is time to leave. And so it's like listening and then acting on what you hear. And so I did. It took me, 5 to 7 minutes to really like listen to myself. But then I got up and I walked out. And I'm so glad I did, because like my husband left today for a week away at the coast for work. And we got to have that time together, instead of staying there for another hour and then talking to people for another half hour, 45 minutes, and then coming home wiped from all that. And so I don't have to make anyone else wrong to listen to myself and to act on what I hear.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've learned within myself, it just takes practice getting used to that feeling of
Mhm.
like listening to yourself, honoring what you need, and then giving yourself what you need, even though some people might get upset or, XYZ, or you're afraid of what people will
Mhm.
think, which is usually the case. People,
Yeah.
sometimes people do get upset, and then
Right.
you have to like, align with yourself and be okay with that. And it just takes time, like, to practice that and be okay with that,
Yes.
and prioritize your own truth. And this goes
Mhm.
for everything, don't you think? This really comes back to like
Absolutely.
also what we're saying about like sharing vulnerably on social media and showing up and
Mhm.
um
Yeah, it really
yeah.
does. It makes me think of, there's a book I read back, I want to say like 2015-ish, maybe 2016. It was called Passionate Marriage, and it's a really great book for,
Mm.
like healthy relationship. And one of the things that the author, the name makes me smile every time, David Schnarch. It's like Schnarch. Like we actually turned it into a verb around our house for a while. I'm not, are you schnarching that? But anyway, he has this really cool like approach that he uses where he talks about the difference between self-validated intimacy and
Mm.
other validated intimacy. And he says
Mm.
we've been taught in our culture, that relationship is basically codependency, where we get our validation from the other person. And if we're not feeling validated, then we expect the other person to change. And his
Oh
whole,
my
I know, it's been
god.
amazing. And so I'm thinking of when I left the spiritual community that I was a part of for 13 years in
Mm.
2015. And I remember meeting with I got that inner guidance that it was time to go. And it was
Yeah.
really confusing to me because I felt so loyal to that place, and they had, been such a huge part of my life and my own healing and getting
Mhm.
through the, really rough times I'd been through in my life. And I was a leader there, and I was like 8 different roles of leadership at that time. And
Yeah.
so I had a meeting with my ministers and the music director, because I was singing a lot too, and just said, I need to take a 3-month leave of absence. I need to check in with myself and then see what, if anything, I want to put back on my plate. And I remember one of my
Mm.
mentors, she, who I adored, like she was my pseudo mom and my practitioner and my guide. And we had done retreats together and classes together. And she had really supported me through so much stuff, but I could feel her judgment of my choice.
Mm.
And she was like, so can I give you some feedback? And kind of made that face. And what I said, this was like the biggest thing I had done up until that point of my life. I still remember exactly what I said. I said, well, you can, but I want you to know that this is the most self-validated choice I've ever made in my life. And I don't care if anyone else understands it, because I know it's what I need to do.
Yes.
I know, right?
Everyone, write that down,
I
what Taylor just said. That
know.
is so good.
And she didn't give me the
Um,
feedback.
yeah, because
She
you are
was,
so sure, right, of yourself.
yeah.
And I think we have to remember that too. Like, the more that we are aligned and sure of our own truth,
Yeah.
the less and less that people are going to want to fix us. At least that's what I've noticed in my own
Mhm.
life, and like,
Totally.
yeah, yeah. I tend to be somebody that most people don't give me feedback, probably
Mhm.
because I'm so like, this is
Yeah,
what
you're
I
just like,
know and this
boom.
is myself.
Yep.
Um, and yet, after coming off of stage and when I had that breakthrough, it was interesting. A lot of people wanted to give me feedback, and I was like, huh, interesting.
Mhm.
So, Yeah, but what was interesting about it too is that I didn't feel the need to absorb it, even though they were
Right.
trying to like
You
give
know, it
me
was their
feedback.
shit,
So
not yours.
right, yeah, and it was also just a sign I'm really in this like opening and transition, and so it's not good or bad. I really want
Right.
everybody to get that.
Yep.
It's just how can you keep coming back to you and not
Yes.
like you take it in, maybe, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
not,
Mm-hmm.
and decide what you want to serve yourself. I mean, that sounded really selfish, but whatever.
No.
Like serve yourself in your highest
Yeah.
good, right?
You got to start there.
Yeah. So thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that because I
No,
was
thank
like,
you.
wow, what you said to her, so powerful.
And that was, and she was one of the people that I became on call for. Like I still even remember like 6 months to a
Mm,
year before that having some boundary issues to where like, you know, and bless her heart, like I was the one that set up the relationship that way because I got so much, my ego got so much out of the pats on the head and the validation and the good job stuff that I got from her. And I actually had that
mhm.
conversation with her 6 months before that and said, look, I need to apologize. I've set up our relationship to make it seem like whatever you need, I've got you. And I actually
Yeah.
need to set some boundaries for my own life. And you need to ask me and I get to decide if I'm willing to do it or not. And
Yeah.
B, I get to decide when I do it. And that was
Yeah.
like the very beginning. You know, one of the workshops that I taught this year was bold boundaries for bold leaders. And I shared
Mhm.
that story because that's part of, you know, I had no boundaries growing up, raised by narcissists. Like you weren't allowed to have boundaries. Like you got taken down if you tried to set a boundary, you know? And so this has been a long journey for me of really learning how to set those boundaries and how to feel like I don't have to defend them. You know, I defined it a bold boundary as one that is unapologetic, explanation free, and comes from a place of self-love, not fear.
Yes. Oh my God. I'm so passionate about boundaries too. My very first 6-month program that I taught after my first Bali retreat, that was what I offered everyone. And that was like, I think it was like our first module or something, but it makes all the difference.
It's so
It makes
huge.
all the difference, especially I mean, for everyone, right? The whole world
Mhm.
needs boundaries, but as
Mhm.
leaders,
Oh yeah.
um, being able to set boundaries is just, yeah.
And being willing to upgrade them as we upgrade, you know, our visibility and our expansion. Like it's not something
Yes.
that was like, okay, I'm good at boundaries. Like I've thought I was really good at boundaries. And then as I grow and as I
Yeah.
have more people wanting some of this, you know,
Yeah.
like then I have to learn
Yeah.
the next level. There's always a new level of boundary setting.
So true. I've felt really uncomfortable since we recently moved back to Las Vegas, and I was, sharing a lot about we're back. And I've had quite a few people reach out to me personally and saying, like, I want to get together and I want to have coffee. And I also want to hear about your coaching journey. And for me, when I hear that, I'm like, like my body freaks out because
Totally.
I'm so protective of my energy and the energy that I do give to my paying clients,
Mhm.
that it's not like I don't want to serve, and I have tons of free content like the show. And so I
Exactly.
had to remind myself that I don't have to meet up personally with every single person. And when I've done that in the past, it actually never ends up feeling good because
Yep.
it feels like people want something from me. And
Totally.
honestly, I just don't have that kind of time that
Hmm.
I mean, we all have a certain amount of time, but I choose not to dedicate my time in that way.
Yep.
So that's been uncomfortable because
Yeah.
the ego part of me is like, oh, you need to meet up with these people or else you're not going to be successful in Las Vegas. And I'm like, that's hilarious. And then the like scared little girl part of me is like, oh, but you need to be loved and they're not going to love you. And like, if you don't meet up with them, like, wow, this is
Like,
really
what? I
interesting.
know. It's fascinating to see what comes up when we start setting those boundaries, even, you know, like intellectually, like all this stuff can come up.
Yeah.
And it's so funny we're talking about this because I just shared so I have a Facebook group, Coaches and Healers on the Cutting Edge, and I follow this leader named Jerome Braggs, and he just shared exactly what you're talking about, that he doesn't do like pick my brain coffee dates anymore, that he's super intentional about where he gives his time, and he's got tons of free content and free things that people, you know, like he's happy to serve, but that he's not just kind of willy-nilly with what he spends his time doing. And I actually shared it in my Facebook group because I was like, oh, this is this right here, because we need to really
Yeah.
honor our value and honor our energy, as we're saying, like really put our energy and staying grounded in it like number one priority.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh. So we have a few more minutes,
Yes.
and I'm feeling like I want to get into a little bit, if you're willing, like your process. I'm just very
Mm,
curious,
yeah.
like when people first come to you and they're healers, um, that have gone through a lot and they're really struggling with these pieces of putting themselves out there, or using their voice or whatever, sharing their story, like where do you usually start? I'm curious.
I love
Would
that.
you be willing to share that?
Yeah, of course. Just
Okay,
a
cool.
clarity question. Do you mean as far as like signing them up as a client or when we start working together?
No, like when you work together, like
Mm-hmm.
like everybody,
Yeah,
we all have our own ways of kind of like of coaching people or bringing people through the other side. And
totally.
so I'm just curious for you, like what are some of those pieces? Of course, if you're working individually with people, you're probably like me and you customize a lot, but
Right,
are there
right.
certain like pieces that you kind of usually bring to the table?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that. Yeah, because the people that are coming to me, most of them are having those real time life experiences, and many of them are considering shutting down their practice because
Hmm.
the thing is so heavy, whether it's like loss or illness or tragedy or ailing parents in the living room or you know
Yeah.
legal battles or whatever the thing is. There is this real fear that they won't have enough to give, both to a service-based practice and whatever this thing is that is probably out of their a certain aspect of it is out of their control.
Yeah.
And so I would say the first thing that I do is really inner stability.
Hmm.
Is really like while I do have Star Spiritual Sundays and I teach specific spiritual principles, I don't require my clients to be in alignment with my spiritual beliefs, but I do like them to have some,
Hmm.
because I can work with them to use whatever it is that they believe to apply to their situation. Because I think sometimes when stuff is really hard, like we set aside all the things that work everywhere else and we think we have to do this differently. And I think it's actually really important to bring whatever has worked for us before into what we're going through now, like whatever tools. And so I think inner stability is really a big part of that.
Hmm.
But also business sustainability, because if they're, in their business trying to be someone they're not, or trying to do these things that they're not really in alignment with,
Hmm.
it's going to be so much more exhausting than if their business is really, their sales and their systems and their strategies and how they're showing up and their messaging and really even how they plan their day is in alignment with who they actually are.
Yeah.
Because like I was just talking with someone yesterday and she was saying that, everyone's been telling her to wake up early in the morning, that if you're a successful person, you have to wake up early in the morning, do the things in the morning. I know you're already laughing because it's like, it's such bullshit.
It's such
And I
bullshit.
know. And she was saying how, her peak time to get shit done is between like 3 and 6 p.m. And that she
Hmm.
was so grateful that her coach was able to affirm that for her, that that's okay. Then set up your life and your
Yeah.
time to be peak during 3 to 6 p.m. And so
Yeah,
I
and
think
it might change. PS,
exactly.
especially if you're going through shit, like when I was going through all my grief with my friends dying. Yeah, right. I was like not starting my day until like 4 o'clock. And even then, some days I couldn't even function. Like I just did
Exactly.
what I could when I had the energy, right? So it's like, oh,
Exactly.
I'm
I
so
think
passionate about this. Good
well,
job.
yeah. So I think that is kind of, those are the kind of the two places that I start from. And as you said, I customize, and depending what they
Yeah.
need, we go from there. But I like what I'm doing so much because I get to flip back and forth between that like deeper inner work, like what is
Yeah.
going to have you, feel stable inside. Do you need like emotional intelligence stuff? Do we need to work around spiritual principle? Is it identity things? Are you
Yeah.
accepting all of you who you are? Are you allowing things to move through you, or are you gripping
Hmm.
so tightly on the way things should be that it just feels like the
Yeah.
universe is kicking your ass, when it's really just like the idea of loosening that grip a little bit. And then the business sustainability, getting to bring my years of training around marketing and sales and systems and strategies, because I
Yeah.
had my own journey where I was pushing myself so hard, and at the end of 2017 I almost gave up.
Yeah.
because I just like was on the couch for 6 weeks at the end of the year and was like, I can't keep doing this to myself. And so I, because I, as you know, have been dealing with chronic health issues for 15 years.
Yeah.
And I was having more flare-ups and I was feeling really awful about myself. And so I made a commitment in 2018 that I would only do things, like I was saying, that felt in alignment with who I actually am. And that's when I actually started to see my business and my impact grow on a more consistent basis. And so that's kind of the principles that I teach is you don't have to become someone else. You have to really honor and know who you are and then make everything match that.
Yeah. And I love that you help them navigate those really tough times because my God, I could have, I probably needed like 5 different people to be able to do that when I was going through a hard time. I did have two
Yeah.
coaches at the time
Yeah.
when I was going through all of my crap. And we just need so much support during that time because it's a challenge sometimes to even get out of bed, And so then like, how do you keep running this business and how do you feel powerful as a healer or a leader, even in the midst of all of this? And I will tell you that personally, I'm so grateful that you're doing this work because somehow I did find that place within myself to feel the most powerful I have ever felt and simultaneously the most I don't believe anybody's broken, but that's the word that's coming to myself is like just a little broken, like broken open in a good way, as Elizabeth Lesser says, one of my favorite
Well, and
books.
also we can know that our, we are actually whole, but still feel like our sense of self is broken,
Totally. I'm like, picking up the piece. Where am I? Like,
yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I really believe that during those challenges, our true self emerges even more, especially when we have some support.
Yeah. And we can, if we're making ourselves wrong, which I know a lot of, awesome, amazing, heart-led, conscious people can be really fucking hard on themselves. And I would say if we're making ourselves wrong for even having stuff going on or even having emotions about the stuff that's going on, like we should just be fine with it, which isn't a thing. Like,
Nope.
And it's all, and for me, it's really, I think one of my biggest principles that I teach in all the stuff that I do is living in the and. I think we can have this battle of either I'm great or I'm horrible. And it's like, you can actually be both. You can have parts of your life that are really amazing and going well, and parts of your life that are really hard and challenging. Like right now, I'm having so many opportunities present themselves like this, thank you for this opportunity and getting to do the opening meditation on Saturday. I've got another podcast interview this week. I've got a lot of opportunities. And, it's been 4 years since I've seen one of my kids. And that's fucking heartbreaking on a regular basis, and it doesn't have to be a battle. I can identify myself as vast enough to hold both. And I think that's a lot of what I do with my clients when they come to me, is helping them identify as this vast being that actually can hold space for a lot more than we think we can. And that when we can have what I call bandwidth, we can have both these really hard, challenging, awful things and growth and expansion and connection and inspiration and impact and income. It doesn't have to be an either or thing.
Yes. Amen to that, Starr. Well, as we wrap up, are there any final words, anything that I didn't ask you that you just really feel called to share?
I just want anyone who's watching this who is, sort of identifying with that, like going through a really hard time. I just want you to know that your circumstances do not define you. Because I think that we've so been taught, like we all secretly buy into this, like good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people bullshit. And that if something hard happens, that, we look for that's why I was talking about making ourselves wrong. We look at where we went off track. I had a client whose husband got cancer, and I could tell that she was like searching for like, well, what did he do wrong? It's like, what if he didn't do anything wrong?
No.
And so I really want to iterate that crappy, really hard, challenging things can happen to amazing, awake, intentional, conscious people. And it doesn't
Yeah.
define who you are, and your life circumstances are just something to get through, but they're not the truth of you.
Beautiful. I feel like I shouldn't even speak after this, but I feel called to share. Have you read Marianne Williamson's book? I don't remember the name of it, but it's about death.
No, I did read the
Okay.
A Woman's Worth, and that was years ago, and that was a big part of my own journey of honoring the parts of my wounds that were about my gender.
Yeah.
Mm.
So she does have a book that I read after my friend died, and it was just an amazing read after going through such a hard time. And she says essentially what you just said, like, who are we to think that we are above getting a chronic illness, or that people who do are bad people, or, it's
Right.
just, it kind of blew my mind open, because I do take the perspective of, our thoughts do create our
Absolutely.
physical reality
Mhm.
oftentimes,
Mhm.
and it doesn't have to mean anything about
Right.
who we are. And I think that's the key
Absolutely.
piece.
Yeah,
So
because yes, our thoughts can create our experience in our life and do create our physical world, and we are not individualized bubbles of consciousness. We
no.
are swimming in a stew of human consciousness with 7 billion other people.
Yeah.
And what humanity believes impacts us in our lives. And so,
Mhm.
yes, we can be responsible for how we respond to challenging things, but I don't think, especially right when all of our shit is up, I don't think that
Yeah.
it's helpful to point fingers and try to figure out where it's our fault,
Yeah.
because sometimes that has nothing to do with it, and that's not helpful. And there may
No.
be a time once you've gotten through the really hard stuff to look back and be like, okay, where did I contribute to this? But that's not the
Mhm.
same thing as thinking that everything that happens to us is our fault and that we should be blamed and
Mhm.
punished for not thinking properly. And I mean, that's just going back to Christianity again. It's like the Santa
Yeah.
Claus God. You thought the right thoughts and you got good presents in your stocking, and you thought the bad thoughts and you got coal in your stocking. And it's just
Mhm.
like, we say we don't believe that, and yet we're still internalizing those beliefs and treating ourselves as though we're being either rewarded or punished. And I just don't believe that's the way the universe works.
Yeah. Me neither. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much,
Mm.
Starr. I
Thank
love
you.
you. You're
Love you
amazing.
too. This is
Mm.
great. And it's really an honor to have these deeper conversations with you, because I know it's so easy to stay on the surface or to talk about happy
Mm.
things. And we did, of course, talk about happy things and laugh and smile and all the stuff. But,
Yeah.
this is the deeper stuff is what I'm built for. I've been through some really hard stuff, and I can go into
Yeah.
those deeper, darker places. And
Yeah.
I'm very, I'm comfortable there, because I know that's not the total truth of me, that I'm yes and, I'm
Yeah.
both darkness and the light. And so is
Yeah.
everyone.
Yes, I love that about you, and I so appreciate this. And for those of you who want to make sure to link up with Starr, we're going to put all of the links in the show notes. And just so you have that link, it's episode 30. So it's jessicatomlinson.com/show dash 30. And Starr, what's your favorite place for people to connect with you, just so you can share that
Ye-
right now too?
Yeah, my website, radicalrevelations.com. That's the name of my business. Or
Perfect.
I'm all over Facebook. So you can find me at facebook.com/me star, MESTARR.
I love it. And Starr also has a 60-day program coming up called Vulnerable Visibility. And so
101.
if you're 101,
Mhm.
don't forget that. So if you are going through, tough times, and you resonated with Starr, I really recommend checking that out as well.
Yeah.
Anytime anybody teaches visibility, I'm like, please, just everyone like, do the work.
Yeah.
And Starr helps with the inner work, just like me, but she specializes really in people who are going through those difficult transitions and challenges. So
Yeah.
um, get the
My
support, y'all. We love
Yes.
you.
Thank you so much, Jess, for just being a beacon of light for those of us to gather around.
You're so welcome. I love you. All
You
right,
too.
y'all. We'll
Thanks,
see you in the
everyone.
next episode. Bye.